Hi guys, and welcome to this week's video. This week I'm going to show you how to knit mittens. So first things first, I'd like to just take a minute to explain why I made these mittens. Due to Storm Emma in England, it got quite cold down where I live, and there's a homeless guy who lives in my neighbourhood, and I worried about him slightly over this period, and I wanted to do something nice to make the storm slightly easier on him. So I went ahead and knitted these nice warm mittens for him in the hope that they would keep him at least slightly warmer through the cold nights that he had ahead of him. So first things first, you need to measure out how much yarn you actually need. In this case, I needed about 2 forearm lengths of slack in your yarn, so you have enough slack to cast on all your loops. So once you've measured out the correct length of yarn that you need, then you want to cast on your stitches. And to cast on stitches, you place the needle between your fingers, pull it down, slide it up through next to your thumb, catch the string over by your index finger and then back through your thumb. You then repeat the process of slipping it under your thumb, over to your index and back, over and over again, and that's how you create loops. And since we're working in a circle, we have to use multiple needles. To cast on the second one, you basically just hold it right up against the first needle and do the exact same process as before. You just go under your thumb, over to your index and go back through your thumb loop. So once you've cast on 8 loops on each needle, you want to then join it up into a loop. So there's a few things you have to be careful of. There's the orientation of the knitting. You just make sure essentially that there's no actual twist in the loops. Then after that, you're going to essentially hold it like this. You're going to orient your knitting so there's no twist in the stitches. So basically the chunky bit under the loop will face into the circle. You want to then pick it up essentially in that way, and you're going to knit one stitch and then purl another stitch. Knit a stitch, purl a stitch, knit a stitch, purl a stitch, and you're going to keep repeating that. To knit a stitch, you just hold the yarn behind your left needle, hook your right needle in through the loop, catch it, and then bring it back. And to purl one, you have to do the exact same thing, or you hold the yarn in front of the needle, just as I'm doing here. You want to pretty much repeat this for essentially however long you want this part to be, but I personally think about 15 rows works quite well. So now I've finished knitting 15 circles. What you want to do now, you want to essentially add 2 stitches onto each needle, so it widens out slightly after the wrist. This makes sure that you've got a nice snug fit on your wrist, and that it's not too tight over your hand. So as you can see here, to do that you don't want to knit directly through the first loop, but you want to essentially catch the lower loop just below that. You're going to knit through that one. It can be a little bit tricky at first. So once you've got 5 loops onto the right needle and 4 loops on the left, you then want to repeat the same thing. So you're going to take that loop underneath, wrap the yarn around and pull it through. Then we've added another one and we're going to keep knitting. There we go. And as you can see, I've now got 10 loops on that needle. So what you then do is just repeat exactly what you've just done on the other 3 needles. So I've just knitted up to my thumb. And as you can see on the glove I already made, now you want to add 5 stitches of a different coloured yarn that contrasts well enough that you can remember where it is. So here I'm adding in the yellow stitches. Essentially to do this, you do the exact same as you have been doing, but you literally just hold a different string. So you want to just loop those ones on just to create a little bit of room for your thumb to go through. And once you've added those stitches, you just keep knitting. And you want to knit essentially until you reach your fingertips. So once you reach your fingertips, you want to draw in the pattern to create the taper that you get on gloves. To do this, what I like to do is I like to knit one of the needles so the seam is just in the middle somewhere. The sides, not the two centres, you slip the second loop off or over the first loop and off the needle. You'll end up with 9 loops on each needle. Yeah, so you knit 2 circles, slip one off, 2 circles, slip one off, 2 circles, slip one off, until you've got about 4 or 5 loops left on each needle. So you're going to knit 1 circle, slip off 4 loops, knit 1 circle, slip off 4 loops, knit 1 circle, slip off 4 loops. Basically just until you've got 1 loop on each needle. You can then rip your yarn. You're going to knit it, but instead of moving on to the next needle, you're going to knit and then pull the thread all the way through, as you can see me do here somewhere. And you're going to knit and pull all the way through on all 4 of these needles. Then you are almost done with this part. Yeah, so after that you want to remove the yellow threading that you kept in earlier. I believe it creates about 5 loops and then 5 loops underneath and 4 loops on top. Yeah, you want to essentially pull your needle through on a side loop. I hope you can kind of see it in this video. It essentially fills up the slight gap between the left and the right side of your thumb. Don't worry too much if you don't manage to do it. They're still wearable without it, but it's nice to actually widen out the thumb slightly, and it fills up the gap that is otherwise formed on top of and underneath of the thumb. Once you've hooked on these loops, there should be about 3, 4, 3 and 3 on each needle, because you added those 2 loops on top and below. And after that you just want to keep knitting just as you've been doing for the rest of the glove until you reach the tip of the thumb, and then you're going to essentially just repeat the exact same process as you did for the end of the fingertips, but instead of taking one out on each needle and then knitting 2 circles, you're just going to go straight into the 1 circle system. Once you've finished all the knitting, so you've knitted the thumbs and fingers on both gloves, you'll want to tidy up the ends, and you need sort of a specific needle for that, but it's available in most sewing shops or hobby shops I've found. So it's essentially just a really blunt needle for knitting with through. Essentially what you do is just sew the end into the fabric. A good rule of thumb is to do like 1 or 2 U-turns with the rope. It just helps everything stay together extra well. And once you've done that, then you're all done. There we go, so now the gloves are all knitted. Just got the last snippet off it. And what you then do is just flip them inside out. Almost there. Thumbs can be a little bit tough. And there you go. Once you flip them inside out, then they're just ready to wear. So these mittens are really simple to do, and they'll keep your hot hands very warm. I'll show you another variation on these same mittens that I did just the other day for myself. So I knitted myself these mittens specifically so I could cycle and hold the handlebars, and I could still work the brakes in the meantime, but they'll keep my fingers warmer than if they were all separate. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you're going to knit yourself a pair of mittens, or if you have any questions about the process. So yeah, if you want to learn to make your own bike mittens, then pop me a comment below. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you like my channel, consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.